So
We got time.
Okay, great. So, very early in my career, like I said, I wanted to excel based on what I could see. You know, other success that I've seen. And I think we all want to do that. You know, you see somebody who's successful, you want to pattern yourself after that success so you can get there. But unfortunately, you know, I didn't see a lot of CMOs who were, you know, had their cleavage out, which I like to do. So there was no one to pattern myself after. And I had reached the point, actually I remember it so clearly. I was in a yearly review. That year I had successfully negotiated with the NFL for the Super Bowl halftime show. I put Beyonce on that stage. The following year, thank you. The following year, I lined up Bruno Mars, and then Katy Perry, and then Lady Gaga. So the rocket ship was going.
Yes.
And I was in my review feeling very smug and very happy with myself.
As one would.
Yes, as one would. And my boss at the time said that not only did he not recognize my home runs, but that I was too passionate. He used other words. I'm interpreting it. I was too passionate, too loud, too opinionated. Yeah, exactly. Somebody felt that. And that I would have to find a way to humble myself.
So did he quote Lamar to you?
Look. I'll pretend as if, you know, I was like, you know, walked out there with my shoulders high and all that. No, I cried. I cried all the way home. I cried for a week. You know, thinking that like, well, I'm never gonna get to the top because I don't know how not to be this.
Right.
You know, I don't know how not to be passionate in the meeting. I don't know how not to let my voice rise when I'm excited about something or in frustration. I don't know how not to get teary-eyed when I'm frustrated with something. I don't know how not to do that. And so I hung it up and I just said, well, you know what, it's fine. I'll just be in the middle. It's okay. You know, and if I never get promoted, it's all right. I'll just keep doing the work that I do. But in that defeat, in that total release, came my entire power. You know, because, and I'm telling you, like it would start, I have a colleague, Zach Harris, who I'm still friends with now, who knew me in that
during that time, yeah.
And he sat very close to me, and he said he remembers that very next day when I walked into the office. I had my leather pants on, it had studs down the side, okay? I had a floral blouse on, and it was unbuttoned a little too low. And I sat down in the meeting and I just started talking. You know, I just said like whatever I wanted to say. And it was so fascinating because in that decision that I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna be in the middle, it's fine, came my total freedom. And I just said the things that came to my mind. I was as creative as I wanted to be. I was no longer sitting on my hands because that's what I've been doing.
Assimilate to
Yeah, I've been trying to assimilate. And fast forward many years later, the Wall Street Journal wrote a story about me, and they said, you know, here's a marketer who has had 9 jobs in 6 industries, and how did she do it? And it was the first time I reflected back since that time 12 or 15 years prior when I'd given up. And the thing that came to me was this idea of my freedom, you know, not being held in by anybody's definition. For me, I am a pop culture marketer through and through. Like you can say whatever you want, but that's what I am. I'm a storyteller. And that can translate to many industries. And it can translate to many different spaces. And so when, at the time, I decided that I wanted to leave my corporate jobs and leave Netflix in particular, I decided that I wanted to write my book. You know, I mean, the ultimate test of storytelling, isn't it?
Right.
And then after my book was published and the promotion was done, and I was sitting on my couch and thinking, what do I do now? You know, here comes another opportunity in front of the camera to storytell. And so I have not been afraid of my own talent in that very specific place. You know, sometimes we get afraid of saying we're good at one thing because it sounds limiting. It sounds like, you know, you must not be talented. But I'm telling you, I am the best at this one thing.
That's
And
right.
that's why I'm able to move through different industries. That's why I'm able to move from space to space, and it feels authentic because I am still the same. I'm the same storyteller that you will see in the boardroom at Pepsi and that you see on the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Let them know.
But what I'm also hearing you say is, what I ultimately believe, we all come into this world with our gifts and talents.
Yes.
You found that talent.
Yeah.
And that talent is not relegated to just CMOing, which is
Right.
still an amazing achievement
Yes.
on its own.
Yes, that's right.
But being able to apply that gift and talent to many spaces and
Yes.
places.
And not to self-edit.
Not to self-edit. That's what we talked
Because
about.
yes, that's what happens. We say, okay, well, all right, maybe I'm good at this one thing. I accept that. And so when somebody brings you another opportunity, you're like, oh, I can't do that because this is what I do. So bring me something that I do in this space. And then you self-edit. But what if the true talent that you have is not necessarily in a title or even in an industry, but it is in a more sacred space, you know, a gift that has been given to you that you can then utilize across time and space. Now, if you want to stay in the same industry, in the same type of job, then use your talent and do that, for sure.
That's right.
But it doesn't stop you from being able to roam freely, you know, with that talent firmly in place.
But it sounds like when you did relegate to, you know what, I'm just going to be middle management. I'm just going to be here.
Yeah.
Even you thought that was going to be your path, the universe was like, oh no, boo.
Right.
Oh, no. We got bigger things for you. But when you were at least trying to become something, or assimilating and lessening yourself in spaces, and just showed up authentically yourself,
Yeah.
I really believe the right possibility, the right opportunities come to you,
Yes,
right, without
yes.
even working. But that brings me to the word authenticity. We talked about that a little bit backstage. Everybody uses that word so freely. Be authentic. But there's a prerequisite to that, and it's know thyself.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
can you authentically be who you are if you don't know who you are?
Yeah.
If you're constantly trying to emulate other people.
Yeah.
Right? So tell me about your journey to authenticity.
Yeah. Well, oh gosh, that's a very hard question because
That is my
When-
gift and talent.
when I was 12, my family immigrated to the United States from Ghana. We moved from Ghana to Colorado Springs, Colorado, which in October. Is somebody from Colorado? Are you from the Springs? Close. Are we neighbors? No. And it was a difficult transition for me because, you know, at 12, y'all remember what you were like at 12? Right? Well, I was not as cute as I am now. And who wants to be different, you know, when you're 12, right? You just want to kind of fit in. I did not fit in. I was very tall then and very black. And it just wasn't working in Colorado Springs. And the challenge was, of course, in trying to make friends. One of the ways that I realized that I loved pop culture so much was actually in that time, in knowing that, you know, the way that I would connect with my classmates and people at church or, you know, people in the community was to understand pop culture. You know, I had to understand, look, the Denver Broncos, look, John Elway was king in that day, right? I had to know about John Elway. I had to understand music and fashion and politics and like all of the things. And so it was not just a exercise of like academia, it was an exercise of survival at the time. Now, once I made it into the popular girls group, and y'all know how hard that was, you know what I'm saying? I was accepted into the group, and I went to one of their houses, you know, and everybody was there, and we had a great time, and ate pizza, and drank our Pepsis, and, you know, danced to music and all that stuff. And then, the most popular girl was like, Boz, we're gonna come to your house next week. And I was like, oh, hell no. But I ran home, and I told my mom, and I was like, okay, so they're gonna come here, and we're gonna need pizza and Pepsi, and I need a stereo system, and, you know, so I'm going down the list of the things.